Previously on the all-new adventures of the Doctor Who Book Club podcast.
We should do a fifth Doctor book, because we've...
Finally!
Yeah, finally! So this will conclude our cycle through the Doctors. So some Doctors we've been through more than once. I thought that we should do our first missing adventure.
Ooh.
Because we haven't actually done a missing adventure yet.
That's right, we haven't. Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, we've done past Doctor adventures, but we haven't done a missing adventure. So yeah, let's go and let's join the fifth Doctor. Let's join Tegan. Let's join Turlough. Let's join Kamelion. Let's go to the Crystal Bucephalus.
Ooh, okay.
We're going to enjoy Craig Hinton's The Crystal Bucephalus.
That is the one Doctor Who book that I started reading and never finished. I like Kamelion. I like Tegan. That's a start.
I noticed you're not finishing the rest of the time.
Yeah.
And now our story continues.
Welcome, everyone, to the all-new adventures of the Doctor Who Book Club podcast. This is Matt in Minnesota.
Chris in South London. We're having a heat wave, so apologies if you hear a slight whirring noise in the background. It's not a mechanoid, it's a fan. British houses, they are built to keep the heat in rather than let the heat escape. It's about 90 degrees in your parlance, and we don't do air conditioning in houses. It's hot.
I can empathize, although we have air over here, but it's been very kind of sweltering in Minnesota the last couple days in the 90s, pushing 100, and I think the heat index yesterday, when you factor in the humidity, was like 107. So it's been pretty bad. And it's raining now, though, so that's wonderful, although that means the power could potentially go out at any time, so we'll see what happens.
Anything could happen in the next half hour.
Yes.
Or so. Yes. Okay.
Oh.
So
yes. My husband was in your neck of the woods, and
yes,
you and him were able to meet up for an evening.
Yes, it was great. Yeah, so your husband Matt came over to Croydon to do the Sarah Jane homage, and he used a school trip as his kind of like his excuse. It was great. We sat and chatted. It was lovely. It was really nice, it was great fun. Yeah, it was very sweet, and. It did seem like it was very much a whirlwind tour. I arrived at his hotel before he did, and the receptionist didn't have a record of him. I thought, I know he's going here. And then it felt like most of the American school system was staying at the hotel, because like bus after bus opened and divulged its contents, and I was sort of sitting by the door reading my Doctor Who book in a very obvious manner. One of his co-workers, or co-chaperone, came over and sort of, I couldn't work out whether she was saying how lovely Matt was or how lovely you were. I mean, both things are true. I think she was just full of enthusiasm and also lack of sleep.
Yeah.
And just generally gushing. Because at that point, I think your husband, he'd gone like 36 hours without sleep.
Yeah, that was quite the whirlwind tour, and they ended up... First of all, he was super appreciative that you waited for him at the hotel lobby too, just because he was like completely exhausted, and he said that talking with you and chatting and that you were lovely, and it gave him a second wind to complete the rest of the trip. So he appreciated that very much so. And yeah, they ended up going to France and a couple different places in Italy, and ended up in Spain accidentally. Because of canceled flight and rerouting, and they ended up staying in Barcelona for a bit. So,
oh, lovely, Barcelona. As Mr. Tennant once said.
Exactly.
Cool. It's always nice to have an extra bonus surprise bit to your trip, even though it can be a little bit awkward.
Well, that was wonderful. So thank you again for meeting up with him. No,
it's my pleasure. Absolute pleasure. When at the bar, he wanted to kind of like try like a local beer, or because he was saying about how much you both enjoy kind of like craft beers and things like microbreweries, and we looked and the bar was selling Budweiser and Beck's, as well as cider, and British cider is actually tasty and pleasant. So I think he enjoyed it.
Strongbow finally is bringing back their original dry cider to the States, which is good because we have a tendency to have overly sweet ciders here, which aren't very good. No. So, excellent. Cool. So this month we are reviewing The Crystal Bucephalus by Craig Hinton, but before we do that, we're going to get into Show and Tell.
Yes.
So, Chris, what do you have for Show and Tell this month?
Right. So, we've got another little random encounter for you.
Ooh.
So my wife was kind of giving a talk to like a local arts community, and I'd kind of like come along to show support and everything. And she mentioned Doctor Who in passing in the speech, and afterwards a chap wandered over to me and said, "Are you familiar with the Aztecs?" Anyway, the Doctor Who story, the Aztecs. And I went, okay. And I looked at him and I thought, okay, where are we going with this? Because it's sort of like in his sort of 50s or 60s. I was like, you're a bit too young to have been in the TV show. It turns out he was the model for the cover of the Target novelisation.
Oh, wow. Huh.
Yes.
That is a very random encounter.
Yes, it is. It is, because he was a friend of the artist. Also, apparently, can be seen on the cover of the Highlanders, as there are two figures in the background, kind of behind Jamie.
Huh.
He was kind of quite excited. So it was quite cool because I was able to bring up the cover on my phone and put it side by side. I was like, yeah, no, it's you. Because I'd always thought that it was the kind of like the champion was the guy that was on the cover. Mm-hmm. But I do remember when I was watching the Aztecs thinking, you don't look like the guy that's on the cover. But I didn't quite realise, no, it was just a bloke that the artist knew.
Very cool.
Yes.
And it's very random. Yes. And book related too.
Yes. Yeah. My random encounters within London has now become not just Doctor Who related, but book related. So who knows? Maybe next month I might bump into Gareth Roberts on the bus or something.
Funny.
Yes. So, how about yourself?
For Show and Tell, I'm going to just talk about Convergence, which I'm getting ready for this weekend, and by the time this episode goes out in mid-July, it'll probably have been all over in the history books, and it's the 20th anniversary of the convention, so there's lots going on. I've talked about it a few times on the podcast before. It's a regional sci-fi convention with about 7,000 attendees here in Minnesota. And it's also where the phrase "costumes are not consent" originated. So that came out of the Convergence Convention. And I used to be on the board of directors for the convention's parent organization. Chris Jones, who draws for Doctor Who and Titan Comics, he's one of the co-creators. And so there's always like a strong Doctor Who element throughout, and this year we have guests like Marina Sirtis from Star Trek and Mary Jo Peele from Mystery Science Theater 3000, and a main stage performance from Information Society, which will be pretty cool. And Paul Cornell is going to be attending. He's made a point to attend every year since he was first a guest back in 2010, and he says it's his favorite convention.
Oh, cool.
He does a fun thing where he takes about 70 people out into the parking lot and teaches them cricket every year. So...
Yeah. Well, whilst that's going on, I'll be attending an interview to become a volunteer at next year's Cricket World Cup.
Oh,
Keeping on that cricket thing. Yeah.
Nice.
So hopefully I get in, and maybe I might try and see if I can smuggle in any Doctor Who badge, so any attendees that happen to be listening to this are going to go, right, if there's a short bearded steward with a Doctor Who badge, that'll be Chris. But yes. And on a similar note, if you happen to see anybody wandering around at Latitude Festival in July shortly after this drops, and if they're reading whatever our book is for July, do come over and say hello, because chances are that'll be me. Cool.
Have you been watching any Doctor Who on Twitch?
I have, yes. I mean, I've not been watching as much as I'd have liked, but it's just been so wonderful, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I've been watching here and there, not a whole lot, but just it's fun to kind of watch the chat and also just get everyone's reactions on the fun memes that are coming out of it. It's really nice to introduce Doctor Who to like a whole new generation of people, and it seems to be like fairly consistent numbers too in terms of people who are watching, so that's really cool to see.
And also it's a kind of like a rediscovery thing as well, because like London 1965 was not a thing. and now it feels very much like it is.
I warned you, Julius. I warned you.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And as other people, I think it was on RFS, they pointed out that the very recent and very good RTD drama, A Very English Scandal, which is on the true story of a major, quite crazy political scandal in the 70s, in which a leader of a major party may have tried to get a man assassinated. It starts off with the words London 1965. But yes, if you like RTD, if you like Hugh Grant, if you like Ben Whishaw, then I could very recommend A Very English Scandal, and also very nearly finished reading the factual book, which is all based. It's just an amazing story, and that is all I will say.
It's very intriguing.
Yes.
So, The Crystal Bucephalus.
Yes.
This was written by Craig Hinton, and it was his first book. He was the DWM, the Doctor Who magazine reviewer, for 2 years for the Shelf Life column, kind of picking up the torch from Gary Russell on that. And then after Craig Hinton left to pursue writing Doctor Who books, Dave Owen took over that column. And this was originally pitched as a Seventh Doctor Ace and Benny new adventure, but was reworked as a missing adventure when that range was announced. And you can read a bit of the original version in the charity anthology Perfect Timing 2, which was published in 1998.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that. Yeah. Okay.
Outside of Doctor Who, Craig was a information technology journalist in the UK, editing IT magazines in the mid-90s and the IT Network website. And he also wrote Millennial Rights, which was reviewed by the classic Doctor Who Book Club podcast, as well as God Engine, The Quantum Archangel, and Synthespians. And for Big Finish, he wrote one of the Excellus plays with Anthony Head, and also one of the Tomorrow People plays while they had that license. And he died in 2006 at the age of 42. And even though he passed away young and way too soon, I am really glad he was able to experience Doctor Who coming back in the relaunch in the first 2 series before he passed away.
He also wrote as well, I think it was Time's Champion, which was an alternative version of the Sixth Doctor's regeneration to the Seventh, which I think was published for charity. So there are 3 different versions of the story of how the Sixth Doctor regenerates. And I've not consumed any of them. So yeah, that's great. Yes,
this was the 4th missing adventure, relatively early in the range, and it was published in November of 94. The book's divided into 15 chapters and 4 sections, kind of following a restaurant menu theme. So there's sections called like appetizers, entrees, the main course, and dessert. And it takes place in the Milky Way galaxy, or Mutter's Spiral, and it's takes place around the year 10,600 or so. So the 10th millennium. And
Yes.
the Federation, which had kind of dominated prior to that, had been torn apart by civil war. And the galaxy is in the middle of kind of a new dark age where scientific development is limited. And the largest political organization is the Union, which is the leftover Federation. And they're about 100 years out from the Union's collapse, which is followed by a millennium of barbarism. So that's kind of where...
the backdrop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we should mention Bucephalus is the name of Alexander the Great's horse. So that's where the title comes from.
Yeah. It's an interesting choice because I won't want to jump too far ahead. I don't think at any point we get a convincing explanation as to why the restaurant is named after it.
Yeah. Apart from, isn't the settlement or the town called New Alexandria?
Yeah.
So maybe like how the library at Alexandria was named after Alexander the Great, so the restaurant is too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's never stated.
No, and it was such an odd name because I remember my teenage self kind of like having to have a few goes at pronouncing this and then being kind of corrected by my dad. Studied classics. So I was like, but no, it's not pronounced like you don't emphasise the last two syllables. So shall we begin?
Yeah, let's do it.
So at the end of the 10th millennium, you've got the elite of this galactic union all kind of dining at the Crystal Bucephalus. It's a kind of like it's a restaurant that, in a way, subcontracts all the food off to other historical restaurants. So that there's this kind of time equipment designed by a gentleman called Alexandre Lassiter that projects visitors through time with a reduced reality quotient, which means that they can spend brief periods in the past without altering history. A little thing on Alexandre Lassiter. His surname, Lassiter. I think that's a nod to Neighbours, the Australian TV series. Is the main bar and restaurant-y thing in that is called Lassiter's.
That would not surprise me because there are quite a few.
Yeah.
There's references to Star Trek and Dynasty and all sorts of.
Yeah. We can play a spot the reference game. Yeah, we've got all these people eating for a time. And there's a gentleman called Maximilian Orestes, who's the kingpin of a criminal syndicate known as the Elective. And Orestes has been poisoned by a bottle of wine and was sent from the benefactor's cubiculo. And this kind of proves that he was murdered by someone from his own time zone, because he's killed in... is it in the 90s? It's kind of like... Certainly it's in the, if not 20th century, 21st century, whilst he's sort of like visiting somewhere.
Mm-hmm. So this reality quotient, it kind of projects people backwards with, they say like a 0.5 reality quotient. So you're able to experience the pleasures of the era, so like eating different kinds of food and stuff, but you're not able to interact with history to the point where you could cause problems. So you're like almost not like a shadow, but you're think of like a perception filter where people just wouldn't notice you, so to speak. Yeah,
you're kind of going on like a time travel safari of sorts. But yeah. So the maitre d' arrests the people that are in the benefactor's cubiculo. This turns out to be Dr. Tegan and Turlough, who'd just arrived at a quaint 18th century French restaurant and are somewhat shocked to be taken 8,000 years into the future and accused of murder. Tegan runs off into the kind of the corridors of the Bucephalus, where she meets Orestes' consort, a woman called Diva, who is being pursued by a man in a shielded combat suit. The man in the suit forces them both into an empty cubiculo and transports them all into the past. And he's wanting to use Diva as bait to make his enemy show his hand.
The Dr. Tegan and Turlough had arrived in France in the TARDIS, so they are really surprised to snatched up by the restaurant and being pulled back to the these cubiculos. They remind me of almost like restaurant booths in a way.
It reminds me of like karaoke booths or kind of like hollow suites. It's that kind of vibe, but with more kind of timiness. one thing as well, the book has a habit of making like one or two like little descriptions of something, then trusting that you remember how these things look. Like there are these stewards who are wandering around the Bucephalus that are kind of like described like goat-like, with kind of goat-like helmets. So it's just mentioned just once. But then I'm struggling to kind of remember, oh yeah, no, there are people wandering around looking with kind of goat faces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's lots of one-off references where you're kind of expected to keep a lot
in your memory. Yes,
as they describe like the restaurant and such too. There's lots of cameos from other Doctor Who species that are mentioned, like Sontarans and Chelonians and Draconians and Alpha Centaurans and Martians and Earth reptiles, which I think is a better name for them than Silurians, or I think was it Jim Mortimer that wanted to use the phrase Eocene because it's more accurate as to when they would have existed. But yeah, they're Earth reptiles in this.
Yeah.
Which I think some of the other new adventures use, or the Virgin line kind of used that phrasing too.
Yes, they did.
And there's lots of in-jokes too that are like not explained. So like when Tegan sees a Silurian, then this is pre-Warriors of the Deep, I think. She's thinking it's like nothing she's ever seen on Earth, which is a joke. and then like when Turlough notices the Bucephalus, the Doctor says, "Quit horsing around, Turlough," after the restaurant name. So there's lots of little throwaways like that, which very clever.
We also see at one point a new version of the Cyberman, but it's just kind of like oh, there you go. There's something walking past it's described. It looks a bit Cyberman-y, but it's a bit more peaceful. And because Turlough kind of like follows it when he's trying to find the toilets or something, and he sees a kind of like a symbol with a kind of a helmet with handles emerging from it, it's odd.
I think they refer to it as a cyber lord, which I don't know that that's ever been picked up or anyone's done anything with that.
No.
Okay, so then the Doctor and Turlough appear to be in serious trouble until the Doctor realizes where he is, and he reveals to the stunned maitre d' that he's the owner of the restaurant, and that he had invested in the Bucephalus some time ago to dispose of the compound interest accumulating in his galactic bank account, and he never expected anything to come of the concept.
Yeah, so when I met your husband, I was just kind of having a little chat with him about the book, and I explained that the Doctor owns the restaurant as some kind of like disinvestment scheme to kind of get rid of some money and to help out with some accounting. And he went, "What?" I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Yeah." It's odd. It does seem to be slightly off-brand. It's not normally what he's up to.
Yeah. Occasionally you'll get him like buying up property or whatever where he like has that house that he stays at throughout the new adventures, but this is kind of outside his normal
spending patterns. Yes,
part of me wonders with this whole book being centered around the restaurant theme to begin with, like if this isn't some big joke about Douglas Adams' restaurant at the end of the universe and Peter Davison playing the dish of the day.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. I remember reading it at a time, as a teenager. First time I read it, I'm thinking, this is basically a big in-joke about Douglas Adams.
So the Doctor, being in the benefactor cubicle, he's trying to find out who had framed him for the murder of Orestes, and the Doctor suggests that Turlough follow the maitre d' on his rounds to learn more about the galactic political situation, while the Doctor speaks with Lassiter about the technology used in the Bucephalus. The maitre d' reminded me a lot of the host in the End of the World episode, the Eccleston episode.
Yeah.
Lassiter is happy to discuss his work with a fellow scientist and explains to the Doctor that his equipment generates time bubbles around his patrons, who are then navigated through the vortex by a pool of legions, which are multidimensional creatures recently released from a period of imprisonment imposed upon them by the Time Lords from the, I think it was the Andy Lane novel, Lucifer Rising.
Yeah, and Jim Mortimer. Yeah.
And then the Doctor comes to suspect that Lassiter has deliberately slowed down the potential of his research in order to avoid creating an actual time machine. But before he can confront Lassiter about this observation, one of the Legions suffers a near-fatal infraction. I almost think of the Legion creatures as like, if you're familiar with the Dune series, like the Spice Navigators. They're kind of like in a suspension tank and hooked up to a bunch of equipment. And also in the Bucephalus is Sven Tornquist, who is the religious leader of the Lazarus Intent, kind of like a pope-like figure. And Sven Tornquist invited the maitre d' to dine with him, but Turlough, fed up with the maitre d's attitude, kind of pushes past them into the cubicle just as the injured Legion loses control of the time bubble, which sends Turlough and Tornquist like off into the vortex, and presumably they're dead.
Yes.
Which is crazy.
Unsurprisingly, Turlough doesn't die here. So instead of disintegrating, he and Tornquist have been transported to the Exemplar, which is the home of Lassiter's former student and lover, Lady Gay Matisse, which is a great name. I mean, there's Craig Hinton's been able to create quite a few fabulous names. Maybe not necessarily memorable characters, but certainly there's some crazy names in this.
They all feel like they're out of like an 80s soap, too.
Yes, they certainly do. So through the Exemplar, Lady Gay Matisse can control the functions of Bucephalus, but without Lassiter knowing about it. And so she's used it to kidnap Tornquist and find out what he knows about her ally. Tornquist manages to kind of like get through the interrogation, and he's sent to the cells of Turlough to kind of like recover for the next session. And whilst recovering, he explains about his religion, the Lazarus Intent, as you mentioned. And it was founded over 5,000 years ago. And it's brought faith and comfort to most of the galaxy. And for all of that time, its followers have been searching for a time machine, which they could kind of try to use to rescue Lazarus himself from his death at the hands of the Sontarans. There's very, very, very clear parallels to kind of Christianity, but with extra time machines being thrown in. So it kind of makes you kind of feel that, or hope that mankind never discovers time travel. Because this is going to happen, isn't it? So Matisse's son, Garrett Bison, arrives with food for the prisoners. And because his mother was exposed to temporal radiation whilst he was in the womb, he's got the body of a grown man, although he's only 9 years old. And so Tornquist is able to easily hypnotise the child with the symbol of the intent, which is this thing known as the inf. And he and Turlough head back to the gateway, intending to force Matisse to return them to the Bucephalus.
And the inf is short for infinity, and it's like a figure eight in terms of what it looks like. And while this is happening, the Doctor and Lassiter are analyzing the readings that were taken during the Legion's malfunction, and they discover that the infraction and what happened in the Cubicle was induced by someone with technology equivalent to that of the Bucephalus. The maitre d', however, refuses to shut down the restaurant, and because the Doctor is kind of an absentee owner, where he doesn't have like, he owns the restaurant, but he doesn't have like a controlling say in like its day-to-day operations, he can't shut it down. And the Doctor is also wondering why nobody from the Elective, which is the criminal organization that Orestes is head of, has responded to his murder. And when he examines Orestes' body, he discovers it to be a clone, which should be impossible because genetic research is forbidden by the Lazarus Intent, and the technology to create a clone doesn't really exist in this time period any longer. And before he can share that with Lassiter, Matisse initiates the next stage of her plans and starts changing the different restaurant designations. So the way the Bucephalus is set up, they have like over 1 million different restaurants that they can choose from in different times and places to eat at. And so she starts altering what's available on the menu, so to speak.
You're probably wondering, what's been happening to Tegan? So Tegan and Diva has ended up in the 80s, where they're kind of going running around. They go into McDonald's on Oxford Street, and where they seem to encounter Ace before she becomes a companion. You get sort of a very stroppy waitress at McDonald's called Dorothy, who tries to kind of force them to leave.
And they don't just go into McDonald's. Like, that McDonald's in the 80s is a destination in the Bucephalus, so like diners can deliberately choose to eat there if they want, which I thought was pretty funny.
I'm not a frequenter of McDonald's, but I could imagine there have been probably better places to go to in the 80s. But hey ho.
Curiosity factor, I suppose.
I suppose a time before McFlurries. So there's much running around in the shopping areas of London. They end up stuck in an alleyway, and the man in the suit catches up with them and reveals that he is actually Orestes, and he knows who Diva, Tegan's kind of companion, really is, and why she agreed to become his consort. And he tried to kind of keep her running around in the past in order to force Lassiter to rescue her. As this isn't seemingly about to happen, he contacts Matisse and orders him to return to the Exemplar. It just sort of gets a little bit. This is convoluted. I mean, as I'm explaining this, I was like, "Oh God, I'm losing the will to live."
There's and we'll get into this more in the review section, I think. But one of the things this book, I think, might suffer from is too much techno babble, where they try something with the. I mean, you learn way too much about how the Bucephalus works, and there's so much detail, and it's they're always trying something, and it's the opposite of what they should have done. It reminds me, there's a Deep Space Nine episode. The worst possible outcome keeps happening over and over again, more so than random chance, and you just get this feeling of dread as you're reading this, like, this isn't going to work. Why are we spending 2 chapters on this?
But also it's kind of like, I don't know how much enjoyment I'm getting from this. And then so Turlough and Tortfist managed to kind of like break in as well, because they're actually kind of like, are they back on the Exemplar at this point? But we've got android servants kind of coming in, and we discovered that the grid has become this kind of like topographically closed system, and Matisse sort of can't really retrieve Orestes from it. And Diva has her own kind of like sort of recall system, this kind of like recall rod to try to kind of get back to the Bucephalus. But what it actually does is it takes her, Tegan and Orestes, to the next location on the kind of topography. So I think this is one that looks like a banquet. And so Tegan still thinks that she's in the 80s, but it turns out that they're on a private party on an alien planet where gate crashing is punishable by death. Yeah, whoop.
Yeah, it was like a fancy dress party where at first she thought she might have been back in like the King's Demons era, and then she thought, it's a modern day like banquet hall recreation of like a Renaissance festival sort of like night thing.
That kind of thing.
And then it's like, oh no, she's on an alien planet.
Yeah, I did quite like that. I kind of like, is this good? Yeah, is this really going to be an 80s type thing? Like, oh no, it's an alien planet. But I mean, at least, it's something vaguely interesting. So that they're forced to kind of like flee again, but there's an anomaly in the grid that separates Tegan and Diva from Orestes, and it sends them to a kind of a crystal world, and Orestes ends up in a bar on 20th century Earth.
Mm-hmm. And So the exemplar, which is this, think of it almost as like Matisse headquarters, and it's almost like a shadow version of the Bucephalus that she had been developing on her own off planet, but kind of in the same vicinity of the Bucephalus, which is on New Alexandria. So then, because one of the Legion creatures in the tank had died in the previous attack from Matisse, Lassiter calls in an off-duty Legion to help stabilize the grid, but then Matisse uses her connection to the Bucephalus to kill it, and kind of in its dying spasms, it alters the reality quotient of the active time bubbles, which means that Tegan, Diva, and Orestes, their reality quotient goes from 0.5 to 1, so they become real enough to change the course of history. And then the remaining Legion in the tank are still working, and the Doctor connects himself to the machinery as well to try and sort out the mess. But when Matisse realizes that a Time Lord has connected himself to the grid, her greed for knowledge kind of gets the better of her, and she tries to scan his mind and learn about, Time Lord secrets. And so the Doctor is trying to both block her attack while simultaneously creating a new recall time bubble for Tegan and Diva. And so the Doctor's kind of caught off guard because he's doing those two things, because all the Legions who are in the tank are still super upset about their imprisonment from the Time Lords. So they all decide to try and attack the Doctor, and they blast him into unconsciousness with the force of their thoughts. And Matisse, disappointed, captures the time bubble which the Doctor had created, bringing Tegan and Diva to the exemplar instead of the Bucephalus. And Diva is revealed to be Helenica Monroe, Lassiter's former colleague and, in true 80s fashion, his bitterly estranged wife.
Yeah, so I think also, is it fair to say, I think it's at this stage that the Doctor now thinks that both Turlough and Tegan have died.
Yes, yeah. So that's kind of informing, like he's really, he thinks he's lost both of his companions at this point, so he's probably more, I wouldn't say desperate, but he's more, he's pretty pissed off.
yeah, things are going out of control. And certainly with the Fifth Doctor, if it looks like a companion's died, then it probably is because they have. So you can understand, because he doesn't have a great track record. So Tegan and Monroe, they've been locked up with Torquus and Turlough. Monroe and Torquus kind of like explain all of these kind of like these personal entanglements and everything to the Doctor's companions. So after Monroe had left Lassiter, he and Matisse became lovers. And together they discovered the sort of like the crystals that could be used to kind of convert time spillage into sort of like harmless radiation. The actual Crystal Bucephalus itself, the giant horse statue in the restaurant, is in fact an integral part of the time projector. Lassiter, though, had broken off all his ties to Matisse when he realised that she was working for Orestes and was trying to get close to him to gain access to his work. And then Monroe says that she went undercover at Torquus' request to kind of get to the Crystal Bucephalus and find out if her suspicions about Lassiter were justified. And she believes that he's deliberately crippled his own work to prevent the Bucephalus from used as a time machine by the Lazarus intent to resurrect Lazarus. For some reason, Tegan kind of gets the feeling that Torquus would be just as happy if the Lazarus intent, so their kind of like their prophecy of the resurrection, was never fulfilled.
He'd probably be out of a job then.
Yes, yeah.
Fearing that his reputation will be ruined if the Bucephalus doesn't open on schedule, the maitre d' convinces Lassiter, who also happens to be his brother, some more 80s soap stuff going on.
Yeah.
To call in the Navigus to take over operation of the grid which is I think like a supercomputer, until more legions arrive to replace the two that were put out of action by Matisse. Lassiter reluctantly does so. He's still under the belief that Orestes is dead, and therefore he has nothing to fear from the criminal syndicate. And meanwhile, Orestes ends up killing some people in a bar brawl with his futuristic weapons, including a bouncer whose future descendant plays like a pivotal role in a battle against the Daleks. So he's changing the course of history by killing people in the present. He doesn't realize that his reality quotient is at a full 1. Matisse tries to retrieve Orestes before the timelines experience like an embolism, but then Lassiter detects her and locks her out of the grid, and he kind of activates all these subsystems, and you can tell Craig Hinton's bringing in his IT defense knowledge.
Yes, yeah.
And the Doctor recovers from getting knocked out by the Legion to work out why Matisse is showing her hand, and Lassiter lowers the defenses just long enough to let her retrieve her agent for the grid, still unaware that the man she is retrieving is Orestes. And as soon as Lassiter is sure that the course of history has been restored, he reactivates his defensive subsystems, shutting Matisse out for good, or so he thinks. But she really still has access from her end on the Exemplar. And then he tries to send the Doctor back to 18th century France to retrieve his TARDIS, but Matisse is able to get into the grid, or she'd have never really left, and she redirects the Doctor's time bubble, leaving him stranded on the cold planet of Pella Citrinus with no way of returning. It's like an Arctic world.
Hoff. But yes. Yeah, so Monroe wires together her recall rod and also taunt fists, and uses them to kind of emit a small EMP, which manages to disable Matisse's androids. Prisoners then overpower Matisse and Orestes, and Monroe uses the gateway to transport them back to Bucephalus, where he tries to. But her control rod fails, and Tegan and Torquus are forced to flee back into the Exemplar, while Turlough and Matisse go into the gateway. Matisse sends her androids after Tegan and Torquus and shutting down the gateway, and releases a virus into Bucephalus control systems. And so in the restaurant, time bubbles are starting to degrade, which is going to threaten the lives of the patrons. And Lassiter realises that he can't actually correct the problem in time. And so to prevent the deaths of all the customers, like thousands of people, he realises he must retrieve his secret equipment from storage and actually turn the Bucephalus into a real proper time machine. So his idea is that he'll actually deposit his patrons properly in the past and then retrieve them later. So instead of them being in this kind of like half in, half out reality quotient-y stuff in the vortex. And so that will prevent them from exposure to the time winds. This does mean, though, that Matisse has actually successfully exposed the true extent of Lassiter's work. Orestes dismisses her from his service and sets off to Bucephalus to collect Lassiter, who's clearly the real genius here. He leaves behind a shattered Matisse with nothing to show for giving up a chance at scientific immortality and betraying Lassiter. You kind of feel a little bit sorry for Matisse at this point, though. I don't know. I mean, of all the kind of like the non-regular characters, the one that I kind of feel I like the most is Tauntfist. But I mean, it's because he's not quite in all of this kind of crazy double-crossiness. Because I mean, he's just he's a bit stoic, and he's a man of faith, even if this faith is kind of looks like it might be utterly groundless.
Yeah.
Of which more later.
Matisse's motivation in kind of forcing Lassiter's hand was to say, see, you've had a time machine all along, and that plays into like the religious elements and the whole fulfillment of the Lassiter intent prophecy, So instead of returning to the Bucephalus, Turlough and Monroe are transported to the 18th century French restaurant where the Doctor and his companions had been dining when all of this had started for them. And materializing in thin air in the middle of this restaurant with, a reality quotient of 1, they're noticed and they're accused of witchcraft by the terrified diners, and they're forced to flee for their lives from the running mob. And this is where our dramatic reading comes in for this month, read by Matt's sister, Mandy. Mandy has appeared in a number of stage productions over the years, most recently with the Northfield Arts Guild, so here we go.
How far now? Helenica was finding it increasingly difficult to make headway through the woods, especially since Turlough's passage through the branches inevitably sent them springing back towards her. "The TARDIS should be just in the next clearing," he yelled. "Just keep moving." "What do you think I'm trying to do?" she screamed as another twig hit her in the face. She looked over her shoulder and could see the glow of the torches about 100 yards behind. She tried to block out their incessant chanting. They're definitely getting closer. Suddenly she fell forward as the dense tangle of branches and twigs gave way to a small clearing. At last, sighed Turlough and pointed ahead. A large blue box sat amongst the greenery, a box with regular indentations on its sides and translucent windows. The TARDIS. That's it. That's a TARDIS. The pinnacle of Time Lord technology, reduced to a wooden shack with a lamp on the top. He smiled. It was the last time I looked. Hoping that this wasn't some strange delusion on Turlough's part, she followed him over to what looked like the door. He started banging. "Kamelion! It's Turlough! Open the doors!" The natives were right behind them, pushing through the woods and demanding that they be burnt. He thumped even harder. "Kamelion!" Was he making it up, she thought? Would the final fate of Hellenica Monroe be as the victim of a crowd of bloodthirsty religious maniacs on ancient Earth? "Please, Kamelion!" A rock bounced off the blue doors, causing Monroe to jump aside. "Open the door, you cybernetic imbecile!" The crowd was only a few feet away, and then the doors opened. Turlough rushed through, grabbing her hand and dragging her after him. So this is a TARDIS. As Turlough shut the doors, she took in the white walls with their regular pattern of roundels and the hexagonal central console with central glass pillar. She was faintly disappointed by the less than impressive display of Time Lord technology. "What took you so long?" Turlough was shouting at the other occupant of the TARDIS, a dull silver android with a roughly human face and an exposed brain pan which revealed simplistic circuitry. "We could have been killed out there." "I was in the cloister room. It took time for the TARDIS to forward your request to me," it answered in a rich, fruity voice. This didn't appear to satisfy him. "The cloister room? What were you doing skulking about there?" "I do not skulk. I was following the doctor's instructions to avail myself of the TARDIS's facilities." The android even sounded hurt by the accusation. "I am pleased to see that neither of you appear harmed." "No thanks to you," he retorted. "Anyway, allow me to introduce Hellenica Monroe." She took the proffered hand and shook it. "So you're an android?" She turned to Turlough and whispered behind her hand. "And a pretty primitive one at that. Solid-state circuitry, indeed." She was shocked when Kamelion answered her. "Appearances can be deceptive, Hellenica. Would you like a demonstration of my gifts?" "Go on, Kamelion. Show our doubting friend what you're capable of." For a second, the android was motionless. Then its body was surrounded by a whirling vortex of blue light, which momentarily flared before fading. Monroe swallowed. Max was standing in front of her, wearing the dinner suit he had worn in Beswick's. "Hi, Diva. Missed me?" "What? I don't—" "I am not called Kamelion for nothing," said the Fomax, melting back into the silver android. "As you can see, it's a shape changer. The doctor decided to bring him on board." The tone of his voice suggested that Turlough didn't approve of the doctor's decision. Anyway, that's the introductions over and done with. I suppose we better get out of here and back to the Bucephalus. He suddenly looked down at his green jacket. It was filthy, with rips and tears from their run through the woods. Monroe realized her own attire was in just as bad a state. "Actually," he sighed, "I think a change of clothes wouldn't go amiss. Some of us can't just conjure up a new outfit, can we, Kamelion?"
And so once Turlough and Monroe are back in the TARDIS and we've had Kamelion let them back in, Turlough is able to pilot the ship back to the Bucephalus. And the temporal instability around the restaurant causes severe turbulence in the time vortex, but Turlough is able to materialize safely kind of at the foot of the Bucephalus statue. However, he still does not fully trust Kamelion and orders him to remain in the TARDIS while he and Monroe contact the Doctor and Lassiter. So this is the scene that's depicted on the cover of the book where the TARDIS is materializing by the horse. And then Kamelion, certain that he could be of use, still follows them out anyway, only to encounter Orestes. And he's immediately overwhelmed by Orestes' strong personality and departs with his new master, forgetting to lock the TARDIS door behind him.
I quite like that as a thing. You have Kamelion just falls under the kind of like under the thrall of the most powerful personality around whenever he kind of like emerges. That's interesting. I don't remember. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen the King's Demon, but I mean, Is that kind of like explicitly stated in The King's Demons?
Yeah,
It is. Okay.
I made a point to watch The King's Demons just before this. It had been 20 years since I had seen it, and had only ever saw it on VHS, so I dug out the DVD and watched it, and it was better than I had remembered it being. It's kind of a nice, short, two-part story. But yeah, they do mention in there that Kamelion is highly impressionistic and kind of adopts the personality of whoever the strongest person in the room is.
How are you going to have a companion work like that? How is that going to be the basis of a regular character?
Not to mention the technical problems with the robot itself.
Yeah. Poor Kamelion. So Tegan and Torquist trying to escape the Exemplar, and they instead managed to find Orestes' quarters, which is decorated with murals of torture, particularly of various alien life forms, especially the Sontarans.
And this gave me similar vibes from Mark Gatiss' St. Anthony's Fire and the bad guy in that one.
Yeah, at least in St. Anthony's Fire, I was able to kind of keep track of all the various people more and sort of like, yeah.
They do tend to blend together in this a little bit.
Yeah, it's like, who's double-crossing what? And your brother, what? Yeah. And another odd thing is quite often, because the focus of the story sort of shifts a lot from groups of characters to groups of characters, but when you rejoin a group of characters, quite often various things have happened to them since we were last with them. And so there are times where I kind of go, well, hang on, no, the Doctor wasn't quite here at this, and I have to flick back through to the previous section and just go, oh no, something's obviously just happened. I was like, what? It's kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, some of the scene transitions are done in such a way too where you can't really tell, like, oh, we're no longer in the same room we were in before.
Yeah, it's not helpful. So Tegan's in Orestes' room and she realises that Torquist is growing more distraught as they continue, as if something's kind of shaking the very foundation of his faith. But he's not willing to kind of to explain what's going on. And beyond Orestes' rooms, they find a laboratory full of cloned body parts and a rare kind of imph, the Infinity Symbol, similar to Torquist's own, which is kind of confirmation of his worst fears. Matisse contacts them and reveals that she's allowed him to roam freely in order to learn what Orestes has been hiding from her. When Torquist shows her what he's found, she realises the implications of his discovery and decides to cut her ties to Orestes completely. Having detected TARDIS's approach, she sets off to steal it, shutting down her equipment behind her to prevent Tegan and Torquist from following, intending to return for her son Garrett later in the stolen TARDIS.
And then, so on the Bucephalus, Turlough and Monroe arrive in the grid control room, and Monroe is furious to see that, just as she suspected, Lassiter developed true time travel, but never told her, although he knew that her religion meant everything to her, including the fulfillment of the Lazarus intent. And Orestes then arrives and demands that Lassiter hand over his time travel secrets, and when Lassiter refuses, Orestes has Kamelion shoot the maitre d', Lassiter's brother, in the head, and he's dead. And Lassiter finally reveals to Helena Monroe that he had developed a time machine years ago, and because he loved Monroe so much, he used it to rescue Lazarus from the moment of his death, only to find that Lazarus was Maximilian Orestes, megalomaniac criminal who founded an entire religious movement just to ensure his immortality 5,000 years ago. That explains why he doesn't like Sontarans in the artwork in his rooms, because he was rescued from the moment of his death at the hands of the Sontarans by Lassiter. Kind of like how Clara was rescued from the Raven in the Capaldi episode.
Yeah, that's a bit with less Christ-like stuff.
Orestes, after coming forward in the future, that 5,000 or 6,000 years, rises up through the ranks of the elective and seeds the galaxy with clones of himself, which have a shortened lifespan and more limited intelligence. So even if he's killed, his consciousness will transfer itself to another waiting body, if there's one nearby. And he reveals his true identity. So he says, "I'm the head of the Lazarus intent, and I want to become the ruler of the galaxy."
Dun, dun, dun.
small goals,
So, yeah, you have to start somewhere. So, yeah, you may recall that the Doctor, what feels like sort of years ago, was stranded on this cold planet, sort of Pallas Citrinus, with no way of kind of escaping. Thinking, well, he's got to get back into this narrative somehow or other. So, how does he do this? He befriends the locals and opens a restaurant, and he wants it to be this kind of like galaxy-class restaurant, so that it then gets added to the Crystal Bucephalus list of restaurants. And I vividly remember this it's one of the few bits I do vividly remember from when I first read it. And I thought that this section, in my mind, this section was a lot longer than it actually was. After 5 years of work, this restaurant, which he calls the Tempest Fugit, it does get added to the Crystal Bucephalus list. And as soon as the Doctor's sort of temporal monitors kind of detect that the Bucephalus has kind of like started sending people, he passes ownership of the restaurant to his kind of like sidekick who's been helping him run it. And he activates his recall rod, only to end up in the Exemplar instead. It's actually, I quite like that section. I still do. It's quite sweet. I mean, you get to see the Doctor just kind of like bonding with people, and it's quite lovely. And I'd rather, I think, read a whole book set in the Tempest Fugit.
I had almost the exact same note. I was going to say I would have much rather, the novel would have been a third or even a half of, this is literally less than a chapter, where he spends 5 years doing this. And I think about, like, when we read Seeing Eye and how, Sam's journey, we spent a lot more time with her over that course of 2 or 3 years, and I wish something similar would have happened here. I mean, to me, it's a much more interesting story than the one than the one that's being told. But
yes.
It also makes me wonder if maybe this is where Stephen Moffat got the idea that was first in Curse of Fatal Death and later in The Husbands of River Song, with the restaurant at the Singing Towers of Delirium and the Doctor, starting that restaurant up.
There's a few bits of Moffat in here, because you've also got his story for Rose and the 10th Doctor and the Clockwork Robots.
Oh, The Girl in the Fireplace, The Slow Path.
The Girl in the Fireplace, yes, yeah. With all of the kind of like transpositions, because, doesn't that feature 18th century France?
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of kind of timey-wimey. There are people that say that this book has a good deal of influence. I'm not necessarily sure that's true, because this is quite timey-wimey. You do occasionally get flashes of kind of like ideas that might have been good, and then we get back to 80s double-crossing nonsense. Anyways, right, back to the thrilling narrative. The Doctor's ended up on the Exemplar. And there he's reunited with Tegan and Talkfist and discovers that Tegan's alive. Yay! And discovers that Matisse has made an error while shutting down her equipment, causing the power to feed back to its source, thus creating a singularity that will wipe out the entire solar system if it explodes. And unable to contain the damage, the Doctor decides to kind of close off the power grid and transport it into the vortex, where it will explode out of harm's way. But Garrett, Matisse's son, presses the wrong button at the wrong time, which is kind of trapping him, the Doctor, Talkvis and Tegan in the control room when it dematerializes.
Yeah, he pulls a Rory.
Yeah.
So then Matisse, she arrives in the Bucephalus and she locates the TARDIS, but Kamelion had left the door open, so she's able to get in, and she presses the wrong controls and activates the dematerialization sequence. And there's so much turbulence being created by the link between the Bucephalus's time travel technology and what's on the Exemplar, which causes the TARDIS to stall out in the vortex, kind of like trapped in its own wake. And Matisse tries to use the telepathic circuits on the console to find out how to put things right, but then the sheer amount of information that floods through from the TARDIS knocks her out. And while that's happening, the Doctor's able to open up a gateway to the Bucephalus from the Exemplar and urges the others to go on through ahead. But the gateway, because the TARDIS is kind of stationed between the Bucephalus and the Exemplar in the vortex, the gateway intersects the path of the TARDIS and they end up there instead. But the Doctor's not able to kind of get through the gateway, so when the Exemplar explodes, he's presumed lost, or Tegan thinks he's been killed, and that releases a huge shock wave in the vortex, and the TARDIS catching that wave and the rupture begins to absorb much more energy than it can contain.
Yeah, so bad times. Meanwhile, Monroe, because she's a loyal follower of Lazarus, seems to have got no choice but to pledge obedience to Orestes, who is clearly, the man that she's been worshipping. So she therefore offers to use Bucephalus to open the time gate to a place called Hexdane, which is the capital of the Lazarus Intent. But she's not able to do so because of all the turbulence in the vortex. The Bucephalus' kind of time buffers are flooded with more time explosion than they can handle. And Orestes kind of takes Monroe and Turlough back to his ship, leaving Kamelion to guard Lassiter, while the scientist tries to work to ensure that the time buffers don't actually overload. But as soon as Orestes is gone, Kamelion submits to Lassiter as well, because it's the strongest personality in the room. And Lassiter orders him to kill Orestes. The Doctor isn't dead, surprise, and he manages to arrive back in the Bucephalus, and he and Lassiter discover that the situation is actually far worse than they thought. And the TARDIS is absorbing most of the energy released by the vortex, and when it reaches its capacity, it's going to explode, which will flood the Bucephalus buffers with a massive blast of time energy, and it will cause a chain reaction that will wipe out most of the inhabited galaxy.
And it's strongly implied that, the way the Doctor survives is kind of by riding the time wave or like swimming through the vortex. It's kind of a weird, kind of like how Jack clung to the outside of the TARDIS and, was able to survive the vortex. Like, the Doctor did the same sort of, which is stretches believability a little bit, maybe.
I think believability is somewhat damaged in this book. So towards the end, it just kind of got... I remember reading this through the first time, and I had a kind of like, not so much a low boredom threshold, but a kind of like a low quality threshold when I was a teenager. And I was like, wow, how on earth did I read this all the way through? Tipping our hands here somewhat as to the kind of marks we're going to give it, but gosh.
I kind of wish, it was the way this is set up, with the murder of Orestes, and, it's framed up as almost like an Agatha Christie whodunit, but it really, 3/4 of this book is really a disaster film where you've got them running from impending disaster to impending disaster, and it's it is kind of tipping our hand, but sustaining like a disaster film for an entire length of a novel just isn't really sustainable, I don't think.
No. Because as you say, because it starts off seemingly in one genre and then goes off into another, but does it in a moderately unsatisfactory way. But anyway, right, so...
As the TARDIS begins to disintegrate and you get shots of like the original, the console melting and exploding, and the boy Garrett, he hears it speaking to him, and the TARDIS is guiding him and the others to a place of safety, the very last place in the ship that will be destroyed. And of course, the cloister bell's ringing, and everything's going wrong in the TARDIS, and the route takes them through the TARDIS library, where Matisse, she stays behind and starts grabbing books off the shelves, like How to Build a TARDIS. And
one of the books has the same title as there was a book you could buy in the 80s as to how to actually build your own TARDIS, like a paper TARDIS. Which I had, and instructions were not great. I had a very flimsy TARDIS, and so I ended up buying the kind of like the toy range with the slightly malformed console, as referenced in previous episodes.
The library starts disintegrating, and books are flying around everywhere, and Tegan's trying to save Matisse, who's dangling from a bookshelf, and unfortunately the TARDIS swallows Matisse up, and she gets killed as the library disintegrates around her, and the rest of the party and Tegan are able to get to this like last platform standing sort of area, which overlooks like the entirety of the TARDIS interior, and you kind of get this imagery of interconnected domes and pillars, which there was a book that came out around the time, I want to say it was after the Eccleston series, that was like a visual guide to Doctor Who, which had this incredible fold out, was like a 4-page spread, like interior of what the inside of a TARDIS looks like, with these like reality bubbles. And it's very, in my mind at least, what they were describing was very similar to how that that picture was depicting the dimensions. I'll have to find that and take a picture of it maybe, because it's a really cool representation that I haven't seen circulated in fandom all that much. So they're able to, the TARDIS is blowing up around them because of the excess time spillage, and Tornquist, thinking that he's close to his death, has kind of a confessional session with Tegan, where he reveals that he suspected for some time that Orestes was Lazarus, suspicions which were confirmed in the Exemplar when he found Lazarus's personal necklace in Orestes' quarters, and he believes that Orestes had him kidnapped to find out how close he was to the truth. And his faith has been shaken by the shock of learning the truth about his savior. But then Tegan goes on to remind him that, whatever the reasons for the creation of the religion, for the most part, the Lazarus intent has brought hope to the galaxy, and that the faith of its adherents is stronger than the founder that it was based on.
That's why I liked all this. Is also, when he confesses to Tegan, she initially doesn't want to hear his confession, but he kind of forces it upon her, really. But sort of says that one of the crucial parts of the faith is the ability to confess, and he basically begs it of her as a favour. He's a man trapped, isn't he? As I said before, he's the only person here who actually feels remotely like an actual living, breathing person.
A fully fleshed out character as opposed to maybe a caricature, yeah.
Yeah. So Orestes, meanwhile, has managed to survive the attack, Kamelion's attack on him, which had been kind of like ordered previously by Lassiter, and returns to grid control to kind of go and collect Lassiter. But then kind of Kamelion switches to being under the Doctor's will, and the Doctor sends Kamelion to kind of destroy the Bucephalus statue, hoping that the sudden release of energy from the time buffers will jar the TARDIS out of place and cause it to materialise. And as soon as Kamelion's gone, Orestes orders the Doctor to add his expertise to Monroe's and basically create a stable time gate to Hexthing, which is the kind of like the capital of the Lazarus intent, as we said before. And the Doctor does so very begrudgingly, but as soon as Orestes is gone, Monroe admits that she knows the difference between her faith and the Founder, and that she's changed the gate's coordinates. Meanwhile, Kamelion destroys the statue, and as a result, the TARDIS is kind of blasted free of the vortex and materialises in the kind of like the foyer of the restaurant. In the mezzanine, as the energy from the vortex floods into Bucephalus' time buffers, the Doctor manages to use the restaurant's projector to send it kind of back in time for reduced reality quotient, so meaning that basically the energy dissipates without any effects. So that's convenient, isn't it?
The scene with Kamelion destroying the statue was pretty cool too. We learn that Kamelion is block transfer computation, so he grows to like the size of like 50 feet tall and smashes the statue because they can't, for whatever reason, I think because of like a prior EMP pulse or whatever, they can't fire their weapon at it. And Kamelion reveals that even his silver like robot appearance is a manufactured appearance, so we don't really know what the real Kamelion looks like.
Yeah, we do get some interesting insights into kind of Kamelion, who, I mean, is a character that is underexposed, I think it's fair to say, in Doctor Who as a whole. So if you're intrigued about Kamelion, maybe pick up this book around about the page 150 mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lassiter and Monroe reconcile, and Lassiter finally meets his son, Garrett, and Tomquist, his faith restored. He promises to ensure the Lazarus intent will help carrying the people of the galaxy through the Dark Ages. And the Doctor gives him inspiration to try and avert the Dark Ages that are coming. And Kamelion, realizing that he can't really be trusted because he, reverts to whoever the strongest in the room is, decides to sequester himself in the TARDIS from now on, while the Doctor and his companions venture out, which explains his absence from future stories. Although he's in a couple of other books. I think he's in Imperial Moon and The Ultimate Treasure before he reappears in Planet of Fire. And he had a deleted scene, I think, that was in The Awakening that was cut from the broadcast version, but you can find that on the DVD or I think it's also on YouTube.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I'm going to have a look.
And then the Doctor decides, let's keep going on to the Eye of Orion while the TARDIS is repairing itself, and that gives you the explanation as to why there's a brand new console and interior in the Five Doctors. And then finally, Orestes emerges from the time gate, expecting to find himself in a place of safety, only to realize that Monroe had sent him back to Santar at the exact moment of his death. So that closes out the Orestes loop. And that's how the book ends.
Yay!
Yay, it's over.
Yes! Yeah. Oh, God.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry, people, for choosing this. So, what did you make of this, Matt? Did you love this?
No, I really did not enjoy this book. Let's get that out of the way first. This is, like I said, this is really, I think, the book that I was dreading the most when starting up the podcast, because it was the one.
Oh, really?
The one Doctor Who book that I had never, that I started but never read. Yeah. And I think what it is just, this is Craig Hinton's first novel, and the readability is just extremely poor. And I kept, as I was like, why is it such a chore to read this? And I think it has to do with, he has several multi-syllabic words, where he goes for the bigger, longer words when a shorter word would work just fine. And the way his sentence structure is all over the place, and I tried to find like a good example in the prose where I could explain this, but it's like, so take a paragraph of text, and it's you read a line and you get an impression of the scene, but then it continues on in like a run-on sentence, and then you get another thing that makes you go back and rewrite or revisit what you had previously thought about it. So in a sense, I almost had to read every paragraph like 2 or 3 times. The image that came to my mind was like, you remember those old dot matrix printers where you do like a line of text over and over?
Yeah.
It was like that, but it was stuck on the same line. Where it just, the amount of effort to just to read this was almost exhausting. This book nearly broke me.
Yeah, I mean, I had to do a lot of rereading, I must say, as well. Yeah, more so than I normally do. Because, I mean, I do often, I don't read these books in anything like one sitting. I usually sort of read them in kind of like snatches. But, this, I was often just having to just sit back and reread, and gosh. Also, another thing as well, in a sort of like a paragraph, we'd sometimes kind of shift as to kind of like who the perspective was from. And which would often kind of like throw me a little bit. But yeah, it is. One thing though I think he does get is it does sound to me like the Fifth Doctor. Sort of the words, the phrasing that comes out in the Fifth Doctor's mouth, I can easily imagine Peter Davison saying. I can't really imagine him buying a restaurant and sort of trying to get rid of it. But the actual kind of, the idioms and everything, it does feel very Fifth Doctor-y.
Which is surprising, too, because, this originally was a Seventh Doctor, Benny and Ace, and, I didn't find out about that till after I had finished reading it, but, it felt very Fifth Doctor throughout. I feel like it captured that era somewhat. Again, it just was so... The way it was written was just... It felt a little bit like he was over-egging the pudding, I think, with some of the references. Like, you had references to Saints Alexis and Crystal from Dynasty, as part of the Lazarus Intent. And there's Sapphire and Steel references, and there's just a ton of Star Trek references throughout this book. And I know, when it was written, Next Gen was at the height of its popularity, but there's, the Vulcan Science Academy, which you could write off as a Power of the Dalek reference, but then he also talks about the moon Kronos exploding, which is from Star Trek VI, and the pleasure planet Risa, and then the currency is latinum, which is like gold pressed latinum. And then the Doctor even says he likes to introduce Earl Grey tea to all his close friends, implying that he's hung out with Picard recently, which is it's a lot.
Yeah, because I think there's also, isn't there a reference to the Romulan homeworld in the Romulan language? I think.
Missed that.
I think one of my difficulties with this book is that if I was to kind of like explain it just in kind of like summary to someone, I'd really struggle unless they were a Doctor Who fan, which would basically say, yeah, it explains why Kamelion never leaves the TARDIS and why the TARDIS looks different between the King's Demons and the Five Doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like the book set out to do that, which makes it all the more odd that it was originally a new adventure. But that does feel like the purpose of the book is let's explain this away, and then, oh yeah, we need to tell a story.
Yeah, the story and the plot felt secondary, and I mean the whole religion business with the Lazarus intent, like that could have been really interesting, but it felt more like a plot device than
because like, as soon as that started coming in and getting a bit more focus, like, all right, we're going somewhere with this. But I kind of thought it wasn't particularly interesting to me personally, but I mean I thought it would have been it would have been possibly a little bit more daring if it had actually been an actual sort of real life religion. But I don't think even Virgin Publishing, at the height of its kind of bravery, would have gone with that.
You know, I did like how they explained why Kamelion was staying inside in the TARDIS, and I did like the scene set in McDonald's. I thought that was, somewhat funny. It was nice to see Higgs get a reference. This was way before the Higgs boson particle was discovered.
Yeah, that's true.
And it does dovetail into the Five Doctors quite nicely with the new console room and the Eye of Orion. But that's. I mean, I had to search to find those things. I feel like it suffers a bit, I think, from being a first novel. Where you have that kitchen sink approach where you want to work in all your ideas that you may have had. I looked up the DWM review for this, and I'm shocked by how it was scored.
Yes. It was done by Gary Russell, and I think it was kind.
It was a 5 out of 5.
Yeah, I think it was very kind. Because I remember at the time sort of reading the review after having read the book, and I was kind of okay. No, that's not how I'd have marked this one. But I knew that, that Gary and I sometimes, our tastes didn't always dovetail. One thing I was going to say was the way in which he describes how the Mara's effect on Tegan was quite, because, I mean, they use, and I'm going to use a kind of like a trigger word here, so I'm going to give you more warning than the book does. But, I mean, it describes the Mara as having raped Tegan. Where I was like, oh, you wouldn't say that in a Doctor Who book these days.
Right.
It was quite... We got into that territory. I remember I was quite, whoa, really? Okay. Yeah. I mean, for such a light book, suddenly throwing that into the mix, I was just like, ooh.
Yeah, tonally that didn't fit at all, yeah.
No, I mean, it's just... Yeah, it's an unseemly mess.
Yeah. So,
are we going to score this one?
Do you want me to go first, or do you want to?
Yeah, you go. Okay. You go first. You give the first kick.
All right. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10 for me, which is the lowest I've ever scored a book for this podcast. 1 point less than my previous low water mark, because I'd rather reread that book than this one. It was an agonizing month, to be honest. It really was. It was like, this is my Achilles heel, so to speak. And I don't think I'd ever give a book a 0, right? Because there's something on the page, so at least there's an effort. So I think the lowest I'd ever score something would be a 1, but I will give this, 3 points. 1 for the TARDIS team used. I am a sucker for those kind of more obscure combinations of doctors and companions, and he did capture their essences, I felt. 1 point for the time-traveling restaurant premise, which I thought was clever. And then I think 1 point for the Tempest Fugit scene and the McDonald's scene, which... Again, I wish that 5 years was covered in more detail. It suffers so much from the readability factor that it was so hard to read. It was like molasses, really. Mm-hmm. How about you?
2.
All right.
The 2 marks that it gets are basically down to the strength of the depiction of Peter Davison. Also, as well, I do enjoy those TARDIS scenes. But they've got the library, and sort of, those are fun, as well as the Tempest Fugue. It's just like, oh gosh, yeah. And this is another one of these ones I was kind of like flying with work, and I was having to read it. And what was it that we were reading for February? And again, I was just like flying, experiencing turbulence, and just going like, oh, I have to keep reading this. And so my one thing I will say about I couldn't find my original copy of this book, so I ended up kind of getting another one from Amazon. So I managed to buy this book twice, and when I was with your husband, I was slightly paranoid in case because there was tons of people in the hotel lobby. Not in case my bag was stolen, because I didn't think that would happen, but in case my bag kind of got lost, I ended up having to buy this book a third time. And the copy that I had is from a school library, and it was taken out quite a lot in 1996. And then word seemed to kind of get round that this is a bit of a stinker. It was then taken out April 2005, so obviously shortly after Eccleston, and then the word recycled written out.
Oh.
Even after the kind of the euphoria of Eccleston, people were like, no, that one sucks. And word clearly got round, this one really sucks. So,
yeah, and I keep going back to the 5 out of 5 review in DWM, and I'm just like, there's no way. I'm just, did you read this?
Mate and all, probably, but still, come on.
Yeah. Two other little tidbits from this as we're kind of wrapping it up. It was an interesting suggestion from Turlough. It was kind of like a one-off line about who populated or settled his planet, Tryon. And there's a slight inference that the settlers were related to Gallifreyans in some manner. So I thought that was intriguing, but I don't think anyone's ever done anything with that suggestion. And then it's not specifically confirmed, but it's loosely implied that the Crystal Bucephalus was built on the ruins of Gallifrey, which was, again, it was like a one-off line from Kamelion where the Doctor cuts him off, and obviously that doesn't sync up with Gallifrey is around till the end of time now. But a couple throwaways that haven't really been anything done with them, but I thought they were interesting or remarkable.
It kind of ties in a little bit like with Frontios, where the Doctor is sort of like insisting that people, because they're in the far future, and so it's like, look, don't tell anybody that we're here, just kind of keep it on the lowdown. So it ties into this kind of like strange, mysterious undercurrents that sort of happen seemingly by accident in the Fifth Doctor era. Oh, I wish it could have been better.
Yeah.
Oh, and I didn't talk about Peter Davison's dreadful costume that you have to picture in for the whole book.
Oh, yeah, his blue affair, yeah.
Yes, yeah, which is nicely on the cover. Oh, dear. So, shall we? What should we do now? Should we do feedback or go into this? My brain is fuddled by heat and having to think my way through the Crystal Bucephalus for hopefully the last time in my life.
Yeah. Oh.
If you see me on public transport read the Crystal Bucephalus, prize it from my hands. If you see anybody read the Crystal Bucephalus in public transport, just sort of stop them and say, are you really sure? Get them to evaluate their life choices.
Fingers crossed nothing happens to the podcast files and we have to re-record this one.
Oh, good God, no.
Yeah.
Well, my recording is still going.
Mine
so
too. So yeah, let's go on to listener feedback.
Yes.
No email this month. You can email andwbcpodcast@gmail.com with your thoughts on this or any other Doctor Who story we've done. We do have some new Twitter followers, and we have a tweet from Andy Smith in Virginia talking about our selection from last month. He writes, I'm only just about halfway through Who Killed Kennedy, so it'll be a few weeks before I listen. That's great that he's reading the book, or he read the book along with us last month. And he says, so far he's finding the book to be excellent. And he also says that based on what he's reading so far, the only way he'd give that less than a 9 out of 10 is if the author completely flubs the ending. Which wasn't the case, and you have 2 endings to choose from. So
yes. So on Facebook, we heard from Brian Uyghur. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, Brian, who said that he was looking forward to hearing our thoughts on Who Killed Kennedy, and he described it as a dire read, saying it doubled down on the dark, gritty reboots coming out of the Virgin era. Yeah, I mean, certainly, yeah, it does go dark and gritty.
It does.
Yeah, and so I did try to assure him that the next one will be somewhat lighter and our first missing adventure, which it is. But yes, for me personally, everyone's tastes vary, but for me, Crystal Bucephalus was worse. So and we've had sort of likes from from listener Jeff. And so yes. So do please interact with us and everything, and stay in contact.
So next month, so we've now completed our first cycle through all the Doctors. But before we start up again with another cycle, we're going to pause and take a sidestep or two. We're going to be completing a duology, looking at a couple of books from the spin-off media. And you might call this a tale of two archaeologists. Our first of two stops is going to be Paul Cornell's book, Oh No It Isn't, which launched the Benny spin-off line from Virgin Publishing, which ran only for 2 years, May of 97 until December of 99. But during that time, they managed to publish 23 novels. And it was also the first ever audio adaptation by Big Finish, and it helped launch their company 20 years ago. Yeah, I think we're going to take a bit of a sidestep and visit Benny in her first spin-off. And I've listened to the audio several years ago, but I've never read the book itself, so I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, I haven't read it. I was put off by the review, I think by Craig Hinton. So it probably means it will be genius. So I have opened I've opened my copy and see that amongst the people that Paul dedicates the book to is Stephen Moffat, who says without whom this book and he wouldn't exist. So yeah, it's interesting to see a Moffat reference in a book from 1997.
Huh, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, exciting.
Yeah.
Until next month, I've been Matt in Minnesota.
Chris in South London. Happy reading.
Thank you for listening to the all-new adventures of the Doctor Who Book Club podcast. Special thanks to George C. Music for use of their song, Doctor Who Theme, Swing Jazz Version. You can follow us on Twitter at ANDWBC Podcast and like us on Facebook. You can support the show by leaving us a rating and review on iTunes. You can contact the show by emailing your thoughts to andwbcpodcast@gmail.com. And until next month, happy reading. All right.
Oh, I'm glad we got that.
Yes.
Oh, dearie.
The restaurant is closed.
Yeah, oh, thank goodness.
I've got someone who wants to say hi to you really quickly.
Oh, cool.
1 sec.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, just fine. I knew you guys were recording, so I just wanted to come up and say hi.
Cool. I hear you went to Spain by accident.
By accident is a good way to put it, yes. It was a long story, but yes, it is. I was in Barcelona for about 6 hours or something. And,
oh, okay. So you didn't have time to see anything?
No, we landed at night. We drove all the way across town to a hotel, stayed there for like 2 hours, drove all the way back, and then flew to Florence. So I got about like an hour and a half of sleep in that 36-hour period, which was great.
Right.
The only thing that was nice about it was the flight from Barcelona to Florence. We got to see the whole southern coast of like France and stuff. So that was pretty.
No, that is beautiful. That's really cool.
Yeah, but the trip, I mean, it was that first day was sort of ended up being not an anomaly in terms of how it was organized. It was just sort of a cluster.
somewhat chaotic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's always difficult when you've got so many people.
Yeah, and so many inexperienced people.
Yeah.
Well, seeing you at the end of that
Cool.
first day was definitely a highlight, so I appreciate that,
Cool.
and it was good
Cool,
to
yeah.
be able to meet you and chat.
Yeah,
That was awesome.
it was good. Yes. Yeah. Well, next time you're on these shores, do please let us know.
Well, all right, I'm
Cool.
going to turn you back over to Matt.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, have a good one,
Good
Chris.
speaking to you. Yes. We didn't mention the raccoon and why St. Paul's is now famous.
Oh yeah. Our claim to fame.
Yeah, in a world where there is so much grimness going on, that we sort of like, yeah.
The raccoon made it.
that's-
Yeah.
Yeah, the raccoon made it.